Guys, welcome back. It's Firefly here, and I thought I'd reward you guys with a special treat that I've been promising you guys for a while. It is the World War II documentary with commentary. So I hope some of you don't mind that. Anyway, guys, let's get into this, shall we? Oh, we're already off to a great start here.
This is the story of the greatest war of world history. It's the story of a terrible time, an age when the most wicked evils were perpetrated. 74 million were to die, 5.5 million Germans, 21 million Chinese, 21 million Russians, 6 million Jews, and 3.5 million Japanese. The images of the past send a message through time, a warning from the past, lest we forget.
And it turns out we've already forgotten half the time.
March 1933. A new Chancellor of Germany is elected. He does not seize power with conspiracy. He uses no violence. He is made Chancellor according to the laws of German democracy. A democracy he has openly and truthfully promised to destroy. He promises openly and truthfully to end the unfinished business of World War I, with blood, if need be. He is Adolf Hitler.
Huh. Weird.
World War II was unfinished business.
Because he actually started
Without
off cool.
knowledge of the Great European War of 1914 to 1918, we cannot comprehend the war that convulsed the world from 39 to 45. Even the fighting that tore across the remotest Pacific islands and the densest Asian jungle cannot be understood. The leaders of the world in 1939
No, it
were
couldn't be
men
understood if you tried.
shaped by the First World War. Hitler had seen the war at first hand as an infantryman in the trenches of the Western Front. And there were older men who had seen a generation of the young lost, consumed by an industrial war machine. When these men took part in the post-war cult of the war dead, laying wreaths at monuments across the continent, they felt the presence of millions of souls standing behind them. To understand how and why war returned to Europe in 1939 is to understand how and why war came to Europe in 1914, and how and why that conflict ended. The cause of war in 1914 was the simple problem of Germany, of how the then new country of Germany could be accepted as a great power by other, much older powers, France, Russia, and Britain. In a tangle of alliances, a climate of aggressive rivalry between these countries burst into war. World War I ended in a strange anticlimax. It's hard for us to remember that after a massive victory in the East, ending in abject Russian surrender and the conquest of vast lands, Germany itself collapsed to defeat without being invaded. Many Germans believed that their armies had been stabbed in the back, betrayed, not defeated at all. The fighting stopped suddenly in 1918 with the armistice. Armistice is a word that means truce, a temporary halt to fighting. The First World War was supposedly ended by the Versailles Conference and Treaty. A summit of France, Britain, Italy, and America met to decide on a system of security that would guarantee peace in Europe. Lenin's new revolutionary government in the Soviet Union was not invited. Germany was summoned only to sign the resulting treaty. The French demanded that the treaty formally blame Germany for starting the war. Britain saw the war more as a terrible mistake. Every line of the treaty followed from the supposed German guilt. The guarantee of peace was to be the punishment and weakening of Germany. In fact, each line was a recipe for a future renewed war. Germany lost territory in the east where huge areas had been won from Soviet Russia. These gains of what in later years would be called Lebensraum, living space, were taken away and used to create a new nation, Poland. A high-minded and noble idea was that states should be decided by nationality. Therefore, the Polish had a country of their own, rather than living as minorities in Germany or Russia.
Of course they
But
do.
in drawing the new map of Europe, the principle of nationality was forgotten at Germany's expense. The new Poland was given access to the sea, and in the process, millions of Germans became a minority in Poland. The new Czechoslovakia was to be given defendable borders and included millions of Germans, the Sudeten Germans, and a minority of disaffected Slovaks. Contrary to the basic principle of nationality, German-speaking Austria was forbidden to unite with Germany, lest the two countries combine their strength. Versailles created a Europe where Germany, still a big, powerful country, was bordered in the east by weak, smaller countries with whom Germany now had scores to settle. The fighting had devastated huge areas of northern France and nearly bankrupted the economies of both Britain and France. The Versailles settlement insisted that Germany pay reparations. Huge sums were to be paid to pay off the debts of France and Britain, repaying money loaned by America. The sums were unimaginably large, crippling the German economy. Versailles imposed military humiliation upon Germany, insisting the Rhineland, that area of Germany adjacent to France, be demilitarized. The German army, the largest in Europe, was to be cut to 100,000, not enough to defend Germany, let alone start a war. The army was to have no modern weapons, tanks or aircraft that had revolutionized World War I. The German Navy was to have no U-boats. Versailles established the League of Nations, which would provide a forum in which international security could be policed and aggression contained. As the people of Europe mourned a lost generation, they lived in a continent where the tensions that had torn the nations apart remained, and upon which had been layered new resentments and new grievances. Now, the most powerful country in Europe remained, with its strength, size, industry, economy, and population intact, and with a whole catalog of further grievances. And the success of Versailles as a system for peace and security depended on German cooperation.
As some armored
If
truck.
Germany refused to pay, if she rearmed, if she moved troops into the Rhineland, the only option open to France and Britain was to restart the ghastly horror of the Western Front, to renew the war, fought to end all wars. Versailles was weakened from the start. The British thought the settlement unfair and unrealistic. The French that the punishment of Germany had not gone far enough.
Of course they
That
thought
the
that.
only punishment of German breach was war, total war, made international relations a high-risk game, made for a bold individual gambler. What of the United States, the power whose entry into the war in 1917 had weighed the scales against Germany? The USA turned in upon itself, concerning itself with the 1920s and all that decade means for American history. Having entered into world affairs, the United States turned its back on Europe, the Congress refusing to ratify the treaty. refusing to join the League. The oceanic distances separating the Old from the New World seemed to provide insurance from the problems of Europe. The map of Europe was now a map to war, the history determined and awaiting the minds and the wills to act out the script. Already, as Hitler took power in 1933, the system of reparations had collapsed amidst the world economic crisis. For 13 years, reparations had been a major issue keeping the war alive. Germany had lurched from financial disaster to disaster. Any individual German's money troubles, the great inflation, and the huge unemployment of the 1920s were laid at the feet of Britain and France. The Germans felt robbed. The French swindled, but the Germans were trying not to pay. The British saw reparations as part of the problem, feeling their abandonment would bring about a European economic recovery. A run on banks in the early 1930s had caused the payments to be written off and had discredited the German government, helping bring Hitler to power. The 13 years of fighting over money helped destroy the Versailles settlement. Britain came to regard everything the French said about Germany as bad sense, the French to feel disillusioned. The story of the interwar years is complicated, and it's just too easy to see a plot by Hitler, some system at work. Hitler was a dreamer of great schemes, but whether events followed his plan is debatable. Plans and systems are imposed by history, on events which are random, on the actions of individuals that are spontaneous and improvised. Plans may exist, dreams may be dreamt, but the gap between idea and reality is large. Hitler presented the German people with one big idea, the destruction of what he called the Slave Treaty of Versailles, and to once more make Germany a power. Hitler's policy from taking power in 1933 was a succession of acts, each a line-by-line deletion of Versailles. One of the great paradoxes of Hitler, one of the many ways in which other political leaders and the ordinary voter in all countries misread Hitler and Nazism, was in believing that Hitler was like every other politician, capable of saying anything out of office, but doing something very different when in real power. Hitler was a politician of action and did just what he said he would do. He promised to abandon democracy. He claimed it the enemy of strong leadership, and at the first opportunity proceeded to set about that very destruction. 1 month after Hitler took office, the German parliament, the Reichstag, burnt to the ground. It was arson. The attack upon the center of German democracy is shrouded in conspiracy theory. The controversy is central to the history of Nazi Germany. The Nazis blamed communists and claimed the arson was the prelude to a communist coup, a plot to establish a Soviet Germany. Indeed, in the polarized and extreme politics of Germany at that time, that was the goal of the Nazis' Bolshevik enemies. The alleged arsonist was Marinus van der Lubbe, a young Dutch communist arrested in the building that night. His voice is silent, as he was tried, condemned, and executed. History will forever turn over and question the events of that night in Berlin. Was van der Lubbe the patsy of the Nazis, who started the fire themselves to create a crisis they would then exploit? Was van der Lubbe the tool of a real communist plot? Was there no plot, but an imagined plot that a paranoid Hitler thought real? Was van der Lubbe the lone gunman, responsible for the whole attack himself? History can only show with certainty the result of the fire, the physical and the political destruction of German democracy.
Well, fuck.
The Nazis used the emergency to suspend parliamentary democracy and arrest and imprison all communist and socialist opponents. The office of
This
Chancellor
guy
was
looking like a
combined
Napoleon
with that
Bonaparte
of
out this
President.
bitch.
Head of government became head of state. The army swore personal loyalty to Adolf Hitler, and a parliamentary democracy became a dictatorship.
Apparently the French Foreign Legion.
Vague and fanciful ideas of Jewish responsibility for the war, which seemed eccentric when the Nazis were an opposition party, were turned into real action. According to Hitler, the Jews sought the destruction of the Aryan Nordic German peoples and had caused war between Britain and Germany. Hitler believed the Jews were using Slav people via Soviet communism to threaten the German race. The result was persecution of Jewish people and businesses, both formal and informal, that spread to all parts of German society.
Wir haben 4 Jahre damals uns ausgebetet und wollen diese 4 Jahre nützen.
Hitler did as he promised. He said he would end unemployment and did so, implementing policy that was a German New Deal, a recovery program that was every bit as successful as that of Roosevelt in the USA. Money was pumped into the economy through vast public works, directly and indirectly creating jobs, raising the level of demand and productivity throughout Germany. A lasting image of the 1930s is of Hitler and other Nazis proudly opening autobahns, futurist highways of a new age. It was a more ruthless New Deal than Roosevelt's, the destruction of trades unions making the manipulation of the economy easier than in America. The great parades of Nazism, stupefying to the eye, were the genuine expression of a nation willingly, gladly, and gratefully marching symbolically and actually in step with the will of one man. Already in 1933, the system of reparations had collapsed. Hitler first made an attack upon the principle of disarmament. Hitler's predecessors in government had been party to a lengthy conference of disarmament demanding revision of the treaty. Hitler, sensing France too weak to do anything and Britain thinking the treaty unfair, simply walked out of discussions and ordered rearmament. It was a gamble. The French raged, but as Germany began to once more launch U-boats, began openly to develop tanks, as the skies began to fill with the embryonic Luftwaffe, nothing happened. Hitler had challenged the British and French to fight. The gamble paid off. Nothing happened. Hitler simply left the League of Nations, and nothing happened. In March 1935, Germany reclaimed the Saarland. Yet another chapter of Versailles and the post-war settlement unraveled. The Saar was a small but economically important area of Germany adjacent to the French border and was seized by France at the end of World War I. The Versailles Treaty promised that after 15 years of French occupation, the population of the Saar could vote to choose French rule, German rule, or independence. It was now 2 years into Hitler's regime. Any Saarlander knew that union with Germany meant joining an aggressive militaristic dictatorship, that it would be a democratic vote to end democracy. The people of the Saar were as educated, as intelligent as any European people. The issues at stake were fully and openly debated. The French made a strong and attractive case for retention of their rule. The voting was free and fair, internationally monitored. 98% chose Germany, chose Nazism, chose Hitler. Each and every European of those times played a greater or lesser part in the coming of war.
Well, guys, if you like this episode so far, please comment, like, share, and subscribe. And I will have the rest of the episodes up soon. And, well, yeah.